Before the story unfolds, a quick pause in the static of space. If you enjoy cinematic sci-fi where humanity survives by being far more dangerous than it looks, tap like, subscribe for more stories like this, and drop a comment telling us whose side you think the fog belongs to. Now let's begin. The fog rolled across the marshland in heavy, deliberate waves, thick enough to choke scanners and dense enough to muffle the low hum of distant engines. Elias Ward moved through it alone, boots sinking into dark soil that steamed faintly where his steps disturbed the ground. His visor displayed warnings in 3 languages, all of them flashing red, all of them ignored. Heart rate steady. Breathing controlled. To anyone watching from orbit, he looked like a mistake that had wandered too far from safety. Above him, just beyond the reach of the fog, the mercenary fleet tightened its formation. 32 ships from 7 species drifted in a loose ring, weapons armed, sensor arrays screaming contradictory data. The contract had been explicit and obscenely well-funded. Locate the apex predator. Confirm its presence. Eliminate it if possible. If not, capture anything connected to it. When the human scout appeared on their scopes, walking calmly through a region marked uninhabitable, the fleet commanders agreed on one thing. This was not coincidence. Elias felt the shift before he heard it. The pressure in the air changed, a subtle tightening that crawled along his spine. He stopped walking, rested one gloved hand against the ground, and closed his eyes for half a second. The soil vibrated faintly beneath his palm, like a distant heartbeat answering him. "Easy," he murmured, his voice barely louder than the fog itself. "They don't know." In the lead mercenary vessel, Captain Rethak watched the human's thermal outline flicker on the main display. Rethak had hunted warbeasts that could crack bunkers and wiped out colonies that paid too late. The human unsettled him not because he looked dangerous, but because he didn't look afraid. No erratic movement. No attempt to hide. No visible weapon beyond a sidearm that wouldn't scratch what they'd come for. "A lone scout," Rethak said, his voice clicking through the translator. "Humans send them to die cheaply. Move in. Box him." Dropships peeled away from the fleet, descending into the fog like stones into dark water. Their sensors degraded instantly, visuals collapsing into gray static broken by brief, meaningless shapes. One pilot laughed over the channel, calling it primitive weather. Another joked about how much the bounty would be worth once the myth was finally dead. Elias heard them coming. He didn't look up. His comm unit chirped once as an automated hail request forced its way through. He let it ring. A second request followed, sharper, edged with threat. He exhaled slowly and accepted the channel. "This area is restricted," he said, voice calm, almost tired. "You should turn around." The mercenaries erupted in laughter. A dozen overlapping voices mocked him, questioned his authority, promised a quick death if he cooperated. Elias listened without reacting, eyes scanning the fog as if watching something pace just beyond sight. "You don't understand what you're standing on," he said at last. "Neither do they." Rethak leaned closer to his console. "You're trespassing on a contracted hunt, human. Step away from the target." Elias finally smiled, though no one could see it. "I'm not near the target," he replied. "I'm standing in its shadow." The ground trembled, just enough to register on inertial dampeners across the fleet. Alerts flared, then vanished as systems failed to agree on the cause. One dropship reported a mass reading beneath it, impossibly large and moving far too fast. The transmission cut off mid-syllable. Silence spread through the channels, thick as the fog below. Elias straightened, shoulders squared, and keyed his own beacon off entirely. He removed his helmet, letting the damp, alien air wash over his face. The fog swirled, drawn toward something deeper, something vast that shifted without sound. "You woke it," he said softly, not to the mercenaries but to the world itself. Above, Rethak felt a fear he hadn't known in decades, the kind that bypassed logic and drilled straight into instinct. The human signal vanished. The fog below began to move with purpose. And for the first time since the contract was signed, the hunters realized the encirclement might not be around their prey at all. The fleet moved as one, a serpentine formation slicing through the gray haze. Captain Rethak's claws tapped a rapid rhythm against the console, each strike punctuating the tension that had settled like a storm cloud over the bridge. Around him, his lieutenants argued in a chaotic mix of languages, scales brushing against metal, mandibles clicking in agitation. They had tracked the anomaly for weeks, following fragmentary signals and half-whispered rumors, and now it all came down to this single human-shaped point in the fog. "Maintain formation," Rethak barked, voice low but sharp enough to cut through the chatter. "Do not fire unless you confirm the kill." Do not underestimate it. Do not. The sensors screamed, collapsing again into static as if the fog itself were rejecting their scrutiny. Drone feeds flickered with strange shadows, sometimes humanoid, sometimes massive and unrecognizable. A cyber-augmented scout swore under his breath, attempting to triangulate motion that didn't obey physics. "Captain, the readings, they're lying," he said, frustration lacing his tone. "It's moving against the currents. Impossible velocity." Rethak leaned closer to the console, nostrils flaring. "Impossible is irrelevant. We act. We strike. We finish this." Elsewhere, aboard another vessel, the insectoid tactician Silk studied the map, mandibles tapping in nervous rhythm. His species prided itself on patience, on calculation, but even he found the human disconcerting. Nothing about him made sense. No signals, no panic, no escape attempts. Just deliberate movement into the unknown. "A mere scout should fear," he muttered, antennae quivering. Yet he does not. It is not instinct. It is choice. Choice does not protect him, a burly cybernetic enforcer said, slamming a fist into the console. Sparks danced across metal. "We have firepower enough to flatten this world. One human cannot alter the rules of survival." "Perhaps not," Silk replied, voice almost reverent. "But something else has been waiting. Something that follows him, listens to him. I feel it." Rethak's eyes narrowed. He hated fear. He hated uncertainty. And yet, somewhere deep, beneath layers of disciplined arrogance, he recognized it. The anomaly was no mere prey. The stories had warned them. Fleets annihilated without warning, colonies vanished with no trace, predators that could read intent and predict movement. And now here it was, in proximity to this single, unarmed human lying in wait, if only in shadow. "Drones in," Rethak ordered. "Scan everything. No corner, no mist, no movement ignored." The drones dove into the fog, their sensors screaming and cutting out in rapid succession. One by one they returned fragmented images, distorted shapes, limbs bent at impossible angles, surfaces that reflected neither light nor heat. Another vanished mid-flight, leaving nothing but a fading echo. The comms channel went silent. Then, a whisper of static like a breath from something enormous and deliberate. The fleet grew tense, each member feeling the weight of the unknown pressing against their armor, their scales, their augmented nerves. Rethak clenched his claws around the console. "Do you see it?" he demanded. "Do you see anything solid? Anything real?" Silence answered him, thick and suffocating. Meanwhile, Elias moved deliberately, unhurried, letting the fog swirl around him. Every step measured. Every glance calculated. He could feel the presence without seeing it, an awareness deeper than instinct, more precise than any sensor. He adjusted his pace, speaking softly under his breath. "Almost there. Calm, patience. They are nervous." The first dropship approached too closely, and a low-frequency vibration rolled through the marsh. The fog parted momentarily, revealing a ripple of scales and muscle, each movement controlled, deliberate, utterly alien. The human did not flinch. The predator's gaze met his, and something unspoken passed between them. Acknowledgement, trust, understanding. Rethak's sensors picked up the anomaly now, a massive silhouette that warped the fog around it. He froze, claws hovering above the firing console. "What in the void?" "Captain, it's larger than the schematics," a lieutenant whispered, tone trembling. "The reading's wrong. It cannot exist at this scale." Rethak felt a knot tighten in his chest. The contracts, the bounties, the legend, none of it mattered if the fleet disintegrated here. Yet the human scout moved with ease, unbothered, as if walking through an invisible current of authority. The predator had arrived but not yet fully revealed. And in its presence, the human's apparent fragility became almost radiant in contrast. One mercenary attempted a probe strike. Sensors fired, weapons discharged in a burst of energy. The fog swallowed it whole. No explosion, no impact. Nothing returned. The human did not react. The predator did not strike. Only the pulse of the marsh responded, quivering under something ancient and calculating. "Do you see now?" Silk murmured to no one in particular. "It is not the human they should fear. It is what follows him." A sudden tremor ran through the fleet, subtle at first, then insistent, like the planet itself was reminding them of its rules. Dropships collided, sensors failed, the mist shifted unnaturally. Even Rethak's decades of experience could not account for the distortion. He clenched his claws, mind racing. "Hold positions. Do not let panic spread," he ordered, though his own voice betrayed the doubt he fought to suppress. Below, Elias knelt for a moment, letting the fog close in around him, listening to the pulse of life larger and older than the galaxy's legends. Almost, he whispered. They cannot see it yet. But they will. And just like that, one scout ship, a sleek predator of the sky, blinked out of existence, vanishing mid-flight. The fleet went still. Every sensor screamed a warning. Every comm channel waited in tension. And in the fog, the human scout remained, calm as if nothing had changed, while the shadow behind him stirred with patient inevitability. Rethak's voice cut through the growing panic, clipped and trembling. Prepare for engagement. All units, prepare for engagement. But even as he spoke, a cold, undeniable truth settled in. They were not hunting the human. The human was the signal, the anchor, and whatever had followed him into the fog was already deciding the terms of their survival. The fleet, confident and armed, hovered on the edge of a nightmare they could not yet see, and Elias Ward simply stood, waiting, letting the fog do what no weapon could. The tension rippled across every vessel, every mind, every scale and circuit. Somewhere in the gray, something massive and ancient had awakened, and the hunters realized too late that they might have been encircling the wrong target all along. Elias paused, letting the fog coil around him like living silk. He lowered himself to one knee, fingertips brushing the cold, damp earth. The vibrations beneath his palm were subtle but unmistakable, a rhythm that did not belong to the wind, the soil, or the distant hum of the mercenary fleet. It was alive, deliberate, intelligent. He closed his eyes and let the awareness fill him, feeling the pulse of something immense and patient waiting just beyond the veil of mist. He had first encountered this presence years ago, during a failed colonial survey on a remote, uncharted world. Back then it had been younger, more volatile, lashing out without purpose. He had been terrified, alone among dying colleagues, but he had survived by listening, by respecting rather than challenging it. And in that understanding, a fragile trust had formed. The predator had chosen him then, not as master, not as controller, but as keeper, a silent partner in a dangerous balance. Elias had learned to read its intentions, anticipate its movements, and above all, to respect its sovereignty. Others had called it a weapon, a myth, a death sentence. He called it a guardian. Above, the fleet shifted nervously, every captain and tactician sensing that something had changed. Rethak's claws hovered over his console as he scrolled through the sensor readings, trying to reconcile impossibility with reality. Shapes that should not exist moved in ways physics could not allow. The fog itself seemed to part and fold around invisible forms, and every signal that returned from the ground was warped, distorted, untrustworthy. The human scout was still there, untouched, unafraid, and in that presence the fleet began to question its assumptions. "Captain," the cyber-augmented enforcer said, voice tight, "something is out there. I can feel it. It's watching us." Rethak's eyes narrowed. "Define watching," he demanded, though even he could feel the unease threading through his chest. The enforcer hesitated. "It's aware of every movement, every signal. Nothing we do is unexpected to it. And the human, he doesn't flinch. He seems to be connected." Silk's mandibles clicked softly. Connected is insufficient. This human is a focal point. The creature responds to him, waits with him, acts with him. Do you not understand the danger? Rethak's talons clenched. Danger is why we are here. We will contain it, neutralize it, and collect our reward. Below, Elias rose slowly, scanning the fog-shrouded marsh with practiced eyes. The first glimpse of the predator revealed only a hint, a massive silhouette partially obscured, its shape folding in and out of the mist. Muscle rippled beneath armored scales, and multiple sensory organs swiveled in independent harmony. Yet it did not move aggressively. It simply observed, patient and aware, attuned to Elias in a way no mercenary could comprehend. He spoke softly, more to himself than the fleet. "Steady now. Don't provoke. They are nervous." The predator shifted slightly, fog swirling around it, revealing glimpses of teeth and claws too large to be measured by human standards. Elias did not react. He did not raise a weapon. The creature waited for him to signal, to reassure it that the intruders were temporary, that the pattern of their arrival mattered little. Rethak's sensors picked up the anomaly again, larger, closer, and yet impossible to quantify. "Scale off charts," he muttered. "Impossible density, impossible mass." His mind raced, trying to recall every legend, every myth he had ever dismissed as exaggeration. The stories of fleets annihilated, colonies lost, scouts vanishing without trace. All of it was converging here, and for the first time he understood that the human was not the prey. Elias stepped forward, raising one hand slightly. The fog parted around him, revealing more of the predator. Its eyes, glimmering with intelligence, focused on him, not on the ships, not on the weapons. Recognition passed silently between them. This was not submission. It was acknowledgement, mutual and absolute. A lieutenant whispered over the comms, voice trembling. "Sir, it's waiting for him. Not attacking us, waiting for him." Rethak's claws twitched involuntarily. "Explain. Do you not see?" Silk said softly, mandibles brushing together. "It does not act on instinct alone. It responds to the human. They share a bond we cannot understand. He is the anchor, not the target." The revelation hung in the fleet like a shroud. Every captain and tactician felt the sudden, uncomfortable truth. The human had been underestimated. He had not walked into the fog recklessly. He had led the predator into position but not to hunt. It had already chosen to observe, to wait, to protect. One dropship edged closer, sensors attempting to capture an image of the creature. The fog recoiled. Readings failed. Communication failed. The ship shuddered as though touched by an unseen hand, and then it vanished, leaving only static. Panic began to ripple through the fleet. The enforcer's voice cut sharply through the comms. "We're losing control." Elias did not move. The predator did not move. The fog only whispered, flowing around them with deliberate patience. The human understood its rhythm, its intentions, its silent language, and in that understanding lay a power the fleet could not measure. Rethak struggled to maintain authority. "All units, engage cautiously. Do not provoke it. Fall back if necessary." But even as he gave the command, he realized it might be too late. The predator was not a weapon to be deployed or captured. It was an intelligent force, aligned with a human whose courage, discipline, and subtle understanding had earned its trust. That bond rendered conventional tactics meaningless. Elias raised both hands slightly, gesturing in ways only the predator could interpret. The creature shifted closer, scales brushing against the mist, but it did not attack. It only aligned with him, a massive sentinel, silent and poised, ready to respond. The fleet trembled beneath the uncertainty, every officer realizing the precariousness of their position. "Do you understand now?" Silk murmured, tone both fearful and awed. "It is not the human who is in danger. We are." The fog deepened, swallowing the marsh in a muted gray, and Elias stood at its center, calm, controlled, and wholly unafraid. Whatever came next, whatever decisions the predator made, he was ready. And in that readiness lay the unspoken truth. The galaxy had never fully understood humanity, but moments like this would etch the reality into legend. Rethak gripped his console, jaw tightening. The human was not prey. The human was the signal, the pivot around which all danger now revolved. And the predator, ancient and immense, had chosen its moment. The fleet waited, uncertain and exposed, while Elias Ward simply watched the fog, and through it, the creature that had already decided the outcome. The fog shifted suddenly, heavier now, moving as though it had a will of its own. Sensors aboard the fleet flared with erratic readings, some reporting impossible mass, others nothing at all. Captain Rethak's claws hovered over the console, each tremor of his hands betraying the unease he refused to admit aloud. The dropships had formed a perimeter, but the fog no longer obeyed geometry. It was fluid, folding around vessels, masking shapes and warping the perception of distance. The fleet had come expecting a hunt. They found uncertainty, and uncertainty was lethal. Below, Elias moved deliberately, every step measured. The predator followed at a calculated distance, its massive silhouette barely visible, yet impossible to ignore. The marsh trembled faintly under its weight, and every creature within earshot fell silent. He could feel its awareness not just of him but of every motion in the perimeter. The predator was not attacking yet. It was assessing, calculating, and preparing for a strike only it understood. Elias whispered under his breath, steadying himself. "Let them make the mistake." In the lead vessel, Rethak's voice was clipped over the comms. "Deploy recon drones. I want full visual coverage of the marsh. Identify all threats. Engage only if directly provoked." His tone was calm, but the flicker in his eyes betrayed the rapid escalation of fear. One scout vessel detached, entering the mist, only to vanish mid-flight, leaving a smear of static behind. A chorus of alarmed voices filled the channels. The insectoid tactician Silk's antennae quivered. They underestimate the scale. Each step, each breath of that human guides the predator. We are not the hunters. We are the prey. Prey does not apply to the fleet, Rethak snapped, though his voice lacked conviction. We are trained. Equipped. We have superior numbers. A sudden shockwave ripped through the fog, shaking vessels violently. Panels flickered. Energy weapons discharged randomly, absorbed by the fog or deflected back toward the fleet. Alarms blared as Rethak's controls slipped from certainty into chaos. Another dropship collided with a sensor buoy, sending shards of metal into the mist. Static swallowed their cries. Elias did not flinch. The Predator advanced, fog wrapping around it like a cloak. Muscle and scale rippled with every deliberate movement. Its gaze fixed on the intruders, yet it moved in harmony with Elias, neither leading nor following, but acting as a single entity through unspoken coordination. The human did not issue commands. He merely existed and the Predator responded. "Captain, they are responding to him," a lieutenant gasped, voice strained. "The Predator moves with him. We can't engage without killing our own drones." Rethak's claws clenched, knuckles whitening. "Form defensive grid. Contain it if we can. Do not let it strike." A low, resonant vibration pulsed through the marsh, felt even through armored hulls. The Predator roared, a sound that carried intelligence as much as raw power, a declaration of dominance without violence. The fog surged, disorienting the fleet. Sensor feeds fractured, images duplicating, then vanishing. Weapons locked onto false targets, and the mercenaries' coordination began to crumble. Elias stepped into the center of a clearing, fog parting around him like water. He spoke softly, words meaningless to the fleet but clear to the Predator. Its massive head lowered slightly, acknowledging him, then shifted attention outward. The first attack came in an instant, ships firing blindly, energy beams slicing through the mist, only to be absorbed, redirected, or deflected by the Predator's massive form. One vessel attempted a focused strike, but the Predator reacted with inhuman speed, displacing the air, creating a shockwave that hurled the craft into a tree line of jagged marsh towers. The fleet's attempts at strategy dissolved into chaos. Pilots shouted, commanders barked orders, and all the while, Elias walked steadily, undisturbed, confident. His calm stood in stark contrast to the growing panic of trained mercenaries. The Predator moved like liquid armor, every motion devastating but precise, avoiding harm to Elias entirely. The human's presence acted as a tether, a living command, guiding the Predator through controlled destruction. Rethak, face pale beneath the exosuit plating, realized the grim truth: they had never been in command. The fleet's weapons, experience, and numbers meant nothing against an intelligence allied with a human who understood instincts and boundaries the galaxy could not measure. Silk whispered, mandibles trembling. "He is not controlling it. He has earned it." The Predator obeys no master, only trust. A final shockwave swept the marsh. Communication channels filled with panicked cries. Dropships collided with one another in blind attempts to escape the fog's deception. A single vessel, trying to flee upward, disappeared entirely, leaving only a ghostly distortion of heat signatures. The Predator paused, eyes sweeping across the battlefield, then turned, retracting into the mist, yet maintaining proximity to Elias. It had decided, and the decision was irrevocable. Only the human was spared. All others were consequences of intrusion. Elias lowered his hands, letting the Predator settle. The marsh returned to deceptive stillness. The fog thinned slightly, but the impression of vast, patient strength remained. The fleet was battered, demoralized, and fully aware that their hunt had failed, not because of their enemies but because they had misjudged the human at the center of it. Rethak's voice cracked over the comms, barely audible. "Fall back, regroup, maintain distance." Elias did not respond. He only watched the fog, ensuring the Predator remained settled, aware, and patient. His heartbeat steady. His breathing even. The threat had been neutralized without a single human casualty, and yet the fleet understood instinctively that they had been given mercy, not victory. The clearing was silent once more. Only the fog moved, swirling gently around the edges of the marsh. Elias knelt again, placing his hand on the soft earth, listening to the Predator's subtle pulse beneath him. The message was clear, unspoken, yet undeniable. The human had not just survived. He had guided the Predator's judgment, and through that alliance, the galaxy had glimpsed a power it could not command, only respect. Above, the fleet hovered, broken and humbled, their understanding of threat forever altered. Elias straightened, eyes scanning the horizon. Whatever came next, he and the Predator would face it together. The fog had receded, but the memory of its judgment would linger, a warning written in silence and strength. The balance had been restored, but only because humanity's subtle intelligence, patience, and courage had intertwined with a force the galaxy had always feared. The predator waited. The human remained. And the mercenaries would carry the lesson of the marsh for the rest of their lives. The aftermath was quieter than any of the mercenary fleet could have anticipated. Only one vessel remained intact enough to limp away, hull scorched and systems sparking, its crew shaken into silence. Captain Rethax slumped in his chair, talons curled over the console, every instinct screaming that the danger had not passed, it had merely been postponed. The reports would make little sense to those who had not seen it firsthand. Words like impossible, massive, and predator could not capture the raw, deliberate intelligence of the entity they had underestimated. And at the center of it all stood Elias Ward, the human scout, calm and unyielding, his presence the fulcrum that had held the storm at bay. Elias had not moved far from the clearing where the predator had rested. The fog still curled at the edges of the marsh, alive in subtle ways, but the predator had withdrawn into partial dormancy, its gaze never leaving him. Its massive form, coiled and silent, exuded a power that defied measurement. Elias crouched, brushing his fingers against the damp soil, listening to the subtle vibrations beneath the surface. Every pulse, every tremor, carried intelligence, a rhythm he had come to understand over years of patient observation. It was not obedience that defined their connection, it was trust, earned and maintained. A faint glimmer of sunlight broke through the mist, revealing the devastation left in the predator's wake. Trees splintered, earth torn, sensor buoys crushed and scattered. Yet in the center of the chaos, Elias remained untouched, a testament to human ingenuity and courage combined with an understanding that transcended brute force. He straightened, adjusting the straps of his gear, and allowed himself the briefest smile. Survival was not just instinct, it was choice. And the predator had chosen wisely in aligning with him. From orbit, the surviving mercenary vessel transmitted its report in fragmented bursts, a combination of awe and terror in every word. Their records would speak of a scout who walked alone into a myth and lived. They would speak of a predator too massive, too intelligent, too precise to be contained by fleets or weapons. And most importantly, they would speak of a human at the center, not commanding but guiding, a living pivot upon which the balance of the encounter had turned. Rethax's voice was hoarse when he finally addressed his remaining crew. "We underestimated the human," he admitted, claws tightening on the console. "Not just his skill, not just his courage, his connection to what we sought to destroy. That bond, it defines power the galaxy has ignored." He fell silent, the weight of recognition settling over him. Even trained mercenaries could not deny the subtle brilliance in the human's methods. The patience, the observation, the courage to stand unmoving while forces far stronger rushed blindly toward destruction. Elias crouched once more, speaking softly, words intended only for the predator. "Rest now. They will remember. They must." The predator shifted slightly, a low rumble vibrating through the marsh, a sound that conveyed understanding, satisfaction, and perhaps something akin to respect. Its scales glimmered faintly as the first rays of sun struck them through the lingering fog. To any observer it might have seemed still, almost dormant, but Elias knew better. It was alert, aware, and entirely under no one's command but its own, yet aligned in purpose with him. The clearing held its silence for several long moments before Elias finally rose, scanning the horizon. He had survived not by firepower, not by numbers, but by insight and connection. The predator, immense and terrifying, had reinforced the lesson the galaxy would struggle to understand. Human ingenuity and subtle intelligence were as lethal as the most massive weapons ever built. Then a distant rumble carried through the marsh, a sound from the fleet, a vessel attempting to escape the aftermath. Sensors flickered, and Rethax's voice cut through the static, strained, trembling, yet aware of the truth he could not deny. "Report, everything, the human, the predator, it." The transmission broke into static, leaving only fragments, half-words and terror-filled pauses. The fleet survivors had glimpsed the consequences of underestimating a human whose courage and understanding could command not through domination, but through choice. Elias allowed himself a brief pause, letting the reality settle. The predator, massive and patient, aligned beside him as always, its presence both protective and humbling. Together they stood at the edge of the marsh, a human and a force older than many civilizations, unbowed and unbroken. The storm had passed, but the galaxy would remember its lesson, that humanity, underestimated and maligned, was capable of cultivating alliances with forces beyond comprehension, surviving, and thriving, where others could only perish. A flicker of movement in the distance drew Elias's attention. One mercenary craft had escaped entirely, engines struggling, hull scorched, carrying the story of the encounter to every council archive and fleet outpost across countless star systems. He allowed himself a faint smirk. Legends would spread, rumors would grow, and yet none would truly grasp the bond that had determined the outcome. They would speak of the predator's might, but not of the human who had earned its respect. The predator exhaled, a low, resonant vibration that Elias felt through the ground. He placed a hand on its massive flank, feeling the subtle pulse of intelligence and power. "We've proven them wrong," he whispered. "They will remember." The fog began to recede, sunlight now piercing fully through the mist, revealing the marsh in its full, scarred beauty. Elias stood tall, surveying the terrain and the predator beside him. The mercenaries were gone, their arrogance shattered, their perception of human fragility forever altered. And the predator, silent yet alive, remained beside him, a living testament to patience, understanding, and the strength that came from earning trust rather than forcing obedience. As the last echoes of chaos faded into memory, Elias turned away from the marsh, moving steadily toward the edge of the world, the predator following in perfect harmony. Behind them, the galaxy would remember the devastation and the power, but it would take decades, perhaps centuries, to fully understand what had happened. Humans were more than survival instincts and resilience. They were cunning, patient, and capable of commanding forces far greater than themselves without ever needing to dominate. Elias cast one final glance over his shoulder at the clearing, letting the wind carry away the lingering fog. A low rumble emanated from the predator, not a threat, not a warning, but a shared acknowledgement of victory. They had survived, and in surviving they had rewritten the rules of engagement, the meaning of power, and the lesson the galaxy would carry forever. Underestimate humanity and even legends will bend to its will. Together, human and predator moved toward the horizon, leaving behind a marsh scarred by chaos, a fleet humbled by reality, and a story that would echo across the stars, a tale of intelligence, courage, and the unshakable bond that no weapon could sever. The galaxy would remember, but Elias and the predator would continue, quietly undefeated, their alliance a living monument to the strength that comes from respect, patience, and understanding.